Friday night already. Herbert Dorsey is back with us this evening. Herbert is a wizard of a man. He is so full of knowledge, intellect, wisdom, intelligence of so many different kinds. We never know exactly what we're going to hear. Herbert, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes, I am.
Welcome back, my friend. I'm glad to have you on the program again.
Well, I'm glad to be here.
So what have you been doing since we last talked? Well, 4 or 5 weeks ago or something like that.
It was only 2 weeks ago.
See? Time flies.
I've been studying a lot.
You do that.
Been ready for this talk.
You do. Herbert is a voracious reader and synthesizer of information. He's a remarkable man. How many books do you think you've read? Herb? Any guesses? Thousands, huh?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, or the guy behind you there, whichever.
Well, I think that it would probably be around 500, maybe. I got a whole walls and walls of books in my library. Plus, I got hundreds of books on my tablet, e-books, you know. So I do read a lot, it's true, but I do a lot of other things besides reading. I do a lot of construction work. We've been building barns and fence lines on our farm lately and things like that.
You know, that's a really interesting thing. I love to build things too. It's such a nice, fulfilling thing to visualize something and bring it into being. It's kind of like playing God, lowercase God.
Yeah, you feel like you're a creator when you build things.
Yes.
You're creating something.
Yes. Yeah, it's fun. It really is fun. All right. So what are we going to talk about tonight?
Well, I didn't get to talking about magnetic motors last time, so I want to spend a little time on magnetic motors.
Sure.
Now, it starts out that the physicists know that the electrons, or they have this model, that the electrons revolve around the nucleus of an atom. And they have a problem with using classical electrodynamics in that while they're circling around the nucleus, these electrons are continually accelerating. And according to classical...
Wait. Hold on. There's two things. They're continually accelerating. I want to explore that. Secondly, what kind of... Are you on a speaker? Are you on a speakerphone by any chance?
Yes.
Can you please use the headset? You'll sound 10 times better. Just pick it up. Oh,
okay, I got
welcome back, Herb. No, it's much better. Thank you. All right. So they're accelerating. So when do they stop accelerating? Do they reach a maximum velocity?
They just keep. It's like the moon orbiting around the Earth. It goes on forever, or basically forever. Okay, so anybody that says there's no perpetual motion, you can always remind them of that. But anyway, these electrons are accelerating when they go in these circular or elliptical orbits. And they know that anytime you accelerate an electric charge, it generates electromagnetic waves. So according to the classical theory, these electrons should be giving off electromagnetic waves continually. And so they should decay into the lowest orbits possible because of that. But the electrons don't. They stay in stable orbits. So it's kind of a mystery as why they don't decay in their orbits while they're giving off electromagnetic radiation. So what they finally determined was, well, the zero-point energy of space itself keeps resupplying the energy to the electrons so that they don't decay into the lowest possible orbits. So basically, these spinning electrons provide a means to tap the zero-point energy. And the macroscopic thing is like a permanent magnet. It's got all these spinning unpaired electrons that create the magnetic field. So the secret in tapping the zero-point energy, one of the big secrets, is to use permanent magnets. They're a continual source of energy. Now,
any particular type of permanent, Herb? Any particular type, ceramic, metal? Does it matter? Just so they're permanent.
No, know, they could be nickel, iron, boron, NIB magnets, which are very powerful. You could just use, the more powerful, the more energy you're going to get out of them.
Okay. All right. Good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So there's a number of inventors that realized this, and a real notable one was Howard Johnson. And he developed a permanent magnet motor, which he patented in 1979. And then the next year, Science and Mechanics magazine, in the spring issue of Science and Mechanics, had a front page article about Johnson's permanent magnet motor. I had Fran Chili send you that picture the last time we talked, so I hope you have it in your archive there somewhere.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's pretty revolutionary because now you got a motor that just powers itself. It doesn't consume any fuel. And the picture on Science and Mechanics magazine, they showed it tied to a generator. So this thing's generating electricity all, totally free. So it's a free energy machine, okay? Now, Howard Johnson wasn't the only person to develop magnetic motors. This time I sent you a photograph, or Frank Chili did, of a Perendev patent on his permanent magnet motor. And I've seen videos of it operating. In fact, some of the links on this website list that I sent you this time has videos of the Perendev motor running. And anyway, and then there's another fellow named Troy Reed who made a permanent magnet motor. And he kept developing it over the years. He spent many decades improving it. And the last iteration of his improvements, he had it in the trunk of a car, an electric car, and it kept recharging the batteries because it was tied to a little generator. And he basically had a free energy car. He could just drive anywhere without ever refueling it.
See, smart man.
That was Troy Reed, and he was backed up by Randy Reaver, who was a known entertainer and an ecologist, and he liked the idea of free energy car, and so he helped to finance Randy Weaver in building that car. Troy Reed in building that car. So
as a quick aside, Herbert, you may have missed this story. A Chinese company announced that they have now patented an automobile that can run up to 500 kilometers on a tank full of water. So we're getting right down to it again.
Well, that's Stanley Myers territory.
Stanley Myers stuff. You got it.
Yeah. He was poisoned because the energy companies have been going to great efforts to suppress this type of technology. They want to keep selling oil to us and keep polluting the atmosphere in the process.
Yep. They don't give a damn. Nope.
Okay, so I just wanted to touch on the permanent magnet motor subject because they are real. They have been invented. I have videos of them working with links on that list of websites that I had Frank send you. And so it's very real technology. There's nothing phony about it. Although there may be a few frauds out there. There are real ones out there, too. So now I want to get into Dennis Lee.
Before we jump out of here completely, did you know the two Australian guys? One of them was a German, but they were Australian, and they came out with a motor. It's got to be 15 years ago now, and they said it was going to be in Walmart and everywhere else, and they promised me the first one that would be made available to North America. And they said they had to go back to the drawing board, and there was some trouble. I don't know what happened, but they just went away. Do you know?
I think I know who you're talking about.
Two guys, two names.
I can't remember their names right now. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But I do know two Australians that were involved in. I don't know if it was Lutech Magnetics or something like that.
You're close. That's what it was. You're close. Yes.
And but you know what? These guys drop off. You hear about them for maybe up to 10 years or so, and then suddenly they disappear.
Well, the question is, do they drop off,
or are suppressed?
Dropped off? Yes.
Just like Stanley Myers, he's no longer with us now. Although his brother's keeping a really low profile because he wants to stay alive, but he's trying to keep the website current and stuff like that on the water car. But anyway, I wanted to touch briefly on Dennis Lee because I was living in Ventura, California. In, I believe it was 1985. I could be off by a year, somewhere in that time frame. When Dennis Lee had moved he had a very successful heat pump operation going up in Seattle. His company was making heat pumps, and Jimmy Carter came out with this deal that you'd get a tax a reduction on your profits if you could generate a more energy-saving device or a device that would save energy. Right. When he heard that, he told his engineers he wanted the most efficient heat pump possible. And they came out, they experimented around, and they developed a heat pump that could pump 12 times as much heat energy as electrical energy that went into the heat pump. Now think about that for a minute. You're pumping 12 times more energy than you put into it. Well, I
know about Dennis Lee. I know this story, and I may very well have had him on the program to explain it, but I know exactly what you're talking about. I'm from Santa Barbara, and he was, anyway. Go ahead.
Okay, so
we're right on the same page.
I went right down to his laboratory when I heard about this stuff. I videotaped his equipment. I checked his equipment out. I came away totally convinced that there wasn't any fraud involved. He had the working machinery there. He did give a demonstration in the Oxnard Auditorium, and I was just going to briefly just say that he was raided by the Ventura County Sheriff's Department 2 days after he gave his demonstration.
They took everything.
Yeah, they took everything, and they imprisoned him for a year without a trial on some phony charge of he failed to file some document with a county clerk, and they bankrupted him, and then they released him and they dropped all the charges.
Yeah.
But anyway, I was just going to go over the theory of how his machine worked. At sea level, at standard temperature and pressure, which is around 70 degrees and standard pressure at sea level, the average velocity of an air molecule is the speed of sound, like your nitrogen molecules or your oxygen molecules. They're moving around at the speed of sound, but they're all moving in random directions. So there's no speed of sound, wind blowing past you.
Well, are they all subsonic, Herb? Do they stay subsonic?
No, they're moving some of them are. I mean, they can go as fast. That's the upper limit, the speed of sound, but they can go slower too. And they bounce around in what's known as Brownian motion, or Brownian motion is an effect of all these molecules bouncing around. So if you could, there's a tremendous amount of kinetic energy involved in these air molecules moving around that fast. There's a lot of energy there. It manifests itself as temperature and pressure in the atmosphere. Okay, so all around us, there's a tremendous amount of energy all around us. Well, what Dennis Lee's heat pump did was just suck that energy out by lowering the temperature of the air, and he used his really super efficient 12-to-1 heat pump. It could pump out 12 times more heat energy than electrical energy. And then he had a super efficient mechanical motor called the Fisher cycle motor that was tied, that they fed this high temperature refrigerant into this motor, and it went through a phase change during its cycle. It would change from real high temperature hot liquid. Hydraulic pressure would push the piston down a little bit. And then with a lower pressure, that fluid would flash into a gas, a tremendous high pressure gas, and would push the piston all the way to the bottom of the stroke. It had a stroke longer than a diesel engine. When it got to the bottom of the stroke, the gas turned back into a low temperature, low pressure fluid, which would come out in the exhaust stroke. So all that high temperature, all that heat and pressure was turned into mechanical energy. The principle had about a 90% theoretical efficiency possibility. where a normal car engine is only about 30%. So it was the tying of those two technologies together allowed them to actually pull the heat out of the air, the heat energy from the atmosphere, and generate 10 kilowatts of electricity, which he demonstrated in Oxnard. So anyway, that technology was totally explainable, and he had it working, and he was arrested they tried to hook him with a fraud charge, but none of the investors in his companies they were all happy with him, and none of them would file any claim against him while they had him in jail. So anyway, okay, now I want to get back to this website I sent you last time. It was called www.aias.us, which is the Alpha Institute of Advanced Studies website. And
okay, give us that again. AI. I'm going to do this with everybody else.
AIAS, Alpha Institute of Advanced Studies. That's what it stands for.
At
.us.
What?
.us.
All right. Okay.
That means it's in the United States, basically.
Got it. All right.
Anyway, at that website, not only have they really improved the standard, it's a vast improvement over the standard model of physics, as I talked about last time. But one of the things they said is, look, we can unify electromagnetism with general relativity and gravity. So that means it's possible, and it's theoretically possible, to tap the energy of the gravitational field and convert it directly into electricity. And that also conversely means we can electrically create anti-gravity. Okay? And I have to say this about their website. I've studied it thoroughly. Most of their theory is written in differential geometry equations. So if you're not conversant in differential geometry, you're going to have a hard time following their theory.
I got a D in geometry. Didn't work for me.
I'm talking about differential geometry. That's much higher level than regular geometry.
That's the D I got. All right, anyway.
Oh, shame on you. Well,
Jeff, I don't do math. I do no.
Yeah,
hey,
I know you're much better at dealing with people and being a good host. And
we all have our abilities, supposedly.
That's right. So most people don't understand differential geometry. I have to admit, I don't understand it. I never had any course material in differential geometry, so it's hard for me to follow their actual theoretical line of reasoning. But they fortunately have created more simple papers that are written in vector mathematics, which I do understand, being a trained electrical engineer. So I can understand their dumbed down version of their theory, but I don't understand their actual original theory. But I can say this, that they have shown that gravity is directly related to electromagnetism. And so that means you can create gravity electronically or anti-gravity. You can create, and you can take gravity and invent a device that can convert that gravitational energy directly into electrical energy. So that's going to be the next big thing, be beyond solar panels. So just have a little box the size of a microwave oven sitting in your house. It'll generate maybe 10 kilowatts of electricity to run all your household needs.
That'll do it.
Okay. Now, there's another website I gave you. It's called www.scalarphysics.com.
It's on that list. Look under Herb's name. You'll see a list of sites. Okay.
Yeah, and the last recording. But anyway, if you don't understand differential geometry, that site also shows there is a relation between the gravitational field and electromagnetism. And basically, what it is well, his theory, this guy's name is Thomas Minderly. And Thomas Minderly was a genius himself. And he developed this the website. It's called scalarphysics.com. And he starts out with the premise the ether of space is basically in units of Webers, which is a unit of magnetic energy. And when you do a mathematical operation known as a gradient, which means how much does the strength of the Webers vary from one point in space to another. The gradient measures how much difference from one part of space to another this Weber strength is, and it creates a vector known as the magnetic vector potential, which points from the higher Maxwell's or units of Maxwell's to the lower Webers. In other words, it goes from the higher magnetic strength to the lower magnetic strength, and it points in the direction of the greatest change from the highest to the lowest. And that creates what's known as a magnetic vector potential that's used in electromagnetic theory. Mm-hmm. And to make things simpler for a lot of your audience, if you take an electrical current, run it down a wire, the vector potential is in the space surrounding the wire, and it's running parallel and then in the same direction as current flow. So all around a wire that's carrying electric current, they have all these A vectors pointing the same direction that the current's flowing. And
interesting.
And if you take
hold on, Herb, right there. Hold on. We got that thought. We got to take a break. We will do that, and it's a good place to pause with Herbert Dorsey. Come right back. Okay, let's get right back to our guest, the phenomenal Herbert Dorsey. Talk about a living library of knowledge. Go ahead, Herbert. This is good.
Okay.
So we got electric current. We got electric current, and on each side, all around the electric current are little eddies, and they're moving the same direction as the electric current, right?
Well, they're vectors. What's known as the magnetic potential vector. Okay. Well, that's basically the official electrical engineering name for it. And what's interesting about these vectors, the A vector or the magnetic vector potential vector, is that if you do another operation on those vectors, you generate the magnetic field. Now, that operation is what's known as a vector curl operator, and I'm not going to explain how you do it, but engineers know what I'm talking about. It's basically the right-hand rule. If you take your right hand and you point your thumb in the direction of the magnetic potential vector, your fingers are going to be curling around it. And it's just like, so we got the magnetic vector pointing in the direction of your thumb, and the magnetic field is curling around that vector in the same direction as your fingers are pointing, just to give you an idea what the curl operator does. So around all these magnetic vector potential vectors, there's little circles of magnetic fields going around them, and they all add together in the whole space around the wire, which creates the overall magnetic field around the wire that's carrying the current, as most electricians know. And that also obeys the right-hand rule as well. So that just to give you a mental picture of what this magnetic vector potential is. It's something that points in the same direction as the current, and magnetic fields curl around it. Okay, that's some of the properties of it. Okay, now, if we go back to this idea of what Thomas Minderly calls the superpotential, we took the gradient of a superpotential, which is expressed in Webers, just pure Webers, not Webers per meter or meter squared. Okay, if you take the gradient, which means you're measuring the difference in the strength of this field from one point to another, and it points in the same direction as the greatest change, you get the magnetic vector potential. But there's another operator you can do. It's called taking the partial derivative with respect to time. So what that means is you're seeing how much these Webers change in strength over time. Like maybe in a second they'll drop to half their value, for example, or something like that. Well, if you take that derivative, you're going to get voltage, the potential, known as volts. Now that's a scalar; it doesn't have a vector direction. And that's the electric potential. So you can derive the magnetic field and the electric potential from doing operations on this superpotential, which is measured in Webers. Now, the magnetic vector potentials is measured in Webers per meter. And if you do the curl operator on it and generate the magnetic field, it's measured in Webers per square meter. So each one is a different, it's related to magnetism, but it's a different form of magnetism. Now, the reason I bring this up is because I've also been studying the theories of Kesh, Mehran Kesh, of the Kesh Foundation. And I've read 3 of his books that he's published, and his theory basically states that the primordial makeup of the universe is little units of magnetism. So he's almost in total agreement with Tom Minderly and his scalar theory. The basic units are magnetic.
These hold on. These little units of magnetism, magnetic energy.
Yeah.
We don't want to think atoms and protons and neutrons and electrons.
No, they're even more basic than electrons or any subatomic particles. They just drift around in a magnetic plasma, is what Keshi says. Well, I find it interesting that his theory, at first when I looked at his theory, I said, oh man, that couldn't be right, because I got a conventional electrical engineering background. I always thought the electric charge was the primary thing. And when you have a moving charge, it creates the magnetic field. That was basically the way I was trained to think. But he goes on to say that the magnetic field is more primary than the charge even. But I thought it was interesting that the superpotential that Thomas Minderly speaks about in his website, scalarphysics.com, is highly related to what Keshi's coming out with. Now, I've been experimenting with Keshi's stuff, and I find that so far it seems to work. So I don't think he's a fraud either. But it's very unconventional kind of science. I mean, it's totally different than anything I was trained in school. Okay? Right. But anyway, according to the Alpha Institute of Advanced Studies, you can create gravity electromagnetically. Okay, so it turns out that in the scalar physics website that they show what the relationship is in much simpler math that I can understand. And what it is, if you take the divergence of this magnetic vector potential, it's proportional to the gravitational potential. And that's like a breakthrough. That unifies electricity and gravity right there. And the reason why this hadn't been discovered much earlier is because this fellow named Oliver Heaviside modified Maxwell's equations and tried to make them simpler so people could understand what Maxwell was saying, because he had 20 different equations and 20 different unknowns. And it was a bear to try to solve his real equations. What we're taught in the universities is Oliver Heaviside's reformulation and simplification of Maxwell's equations. They're not Maxwell's equations at all. So what Oliver Heaviside did, he created this thing called the Coulomb gauge, which sets the divergence of the magnetic vector potential to 0. Right. Okay, now, obviously, if you're on the surface of the Earth, it isn't really 0 because there's a gravitational potential here on the surface of the Earth. So that was basically a false thing for him to do. It was a very erroneous thing. And by setting that divergence of the magnetic vector potential to 0, you totally preclude any connection between gravity and electromagnetism. And Maxwell's original theories, it was unified theory. It did unify gravity with electromagnetism. But Maxwell himself probably didn't realize it at the time, as Thomas Bearden has pointed out. He probably didn't realize they already had a unified field theory. But all the physicists and scientists since then, they were thrown off the scent by assuming, we just set that to zero. It makes equations work easier, so we don't have to fool.
Right. Uh-huh.
And this guy, Thomas Minderly, has now pointed out, no, that was a big mistake. Because if you allow the divergence to not be zero, now you can start calculating what the gravitational electromagnetic interactions are. So that's an important point I wish to make when people will go and visit this scalarphysics.com website. It's very educational, mainly for electrical engineers and people with mathematical background. But he also has a simplified version. He explains to the layperson with diagrams and pictures and stuff. So he realizes not everybody's trained in math. But it's a big breakthrough.
Or geometry.
Or geometry,
It's a little joke there, Herbert.
Well, I know. You like your jokes, Jeff.
I tried. I did my best, and I tried. It just didn't work.
That's okay. We need some humor here. We don't want to take it all too seriously. We're supposed to have fun with all this learning.
That's right. I won't tell you what I got in algebra.
Oh, you better not.
All right.
That's your secret. You don't have to tell me.
I was just a kid. Come on, give me a break.
Okay. Well, some people have music aptitude and artistic aptitudes. Some people have engineering aptitudes. Other people like to be cowboys and ride horses around. Everybody's got a different thing that their thing is.
I plant trees really well.
Oh, good. That's a very valuable thing to do, especially in this day and age. The more trees, the better the air we breathe. So anyway, that's sort of the connection between gravity and electromagnetism is through the magnetic vector potential and the divergence of it. I also, in this new set of links that I sent you, I got we talked about the reciprocal system last time, where I finally realized what the name of the inventor was, or the scientist who came up with the reciprocal system. Dewey Larson was his name. And he developed this system where he started with one major postulate that the only basic thing that's in the universe is motion, and everything else can be derived from motion. And motion is space divided by time. And so the time is the reciprocal of space, and you can invert it, and you'll have space is the reciprocal of time. So the reason I listed this website is because he also comes up with a pretty unified theory based on this postulate. And the theory has been carried on. He's long passed away. He had been around for about a decade or so. But other people have gone over his theory. I mean, he developed this back in the 50s and 60s, and it's been improved and improved upon since then. And so there's a cadre of scientists that keep developing new papers on the subject and pointing out the new improvements on his theory. But he was able to derive the whole entire atomic structure. He was a chemist himself, so he's very aware of chemical structure and how different atoms bond together and make molecules and make different chemical substances and all that. He was able to predict all of that using this theory that started out with the idea that everything in the universe is based on motion. But he did develop the theory into some interesting things that I want to bring up, even though I have a difficult time wrapping my own mind around the concept of scalar motion. And the scalar motion is sort of like you blow, say like you blow up a balloon, and you got little spots on the rubber surface, little paint spots. As you blow up the balloon, they all spread apart from each other. And they spread apart from each other equally and all directions on the curved surface.
That's fascinating. Yeah, very interesting.
On the curved surface, they're all moving apart in an equal amount as the balloon gets bigger, and there's no preferred center of this. Any place on the balloon could be, say, like you had a two-dimensional curved universe that represented the surface of the balloon. There's no center part. Every part is the center, and everything's moving away from you, from any viewpoint on the surface of that balloon. Well, that's a two-dimensional in curved space concept of scalar motion. Okay, so that's probably the best way to try to visualize.
Question. How do you sit down and talk to, or do you even waste your time? And I'm not being facetious here. Do you talk to flat Earth people? They have a litany of material that they're. I figured not. They have so much material that they'll just talk you.
I gotta say I shouldn't say that I don't waste my time. At the coffee shop, we run into them once in a while, and we get into heated arguments.
Yeah.
But
all right. They love to argue.
Sometimes they bring up some good points, though, I have to admit.
That's what I'm saying. They've got a lot of material. Yeah.
You look at a bunch of sunbeams coming through the clouds in the sky, and you see that they're all at angles to each other, right? And then they say, well, the sun's supposed to be 93 million miles away. And if the sun was that far away, why are all these different light beams coming through the clouds at different angles to each other? They should all be parallel. Because from 90, and I really had to struggle with that for a long time because I couldn't explain that. But then I finally found the answer. What happens is the light comes from the sun, but then it hits our atmosphere. Right. And where it hits the atmosphere, visually that acts as the point where the sun really is, optically speaking, because the atmosphere is scattering all the light from the sun, which creates the blue sky effect. And it almost behaves as if the sun was right at the tip of our atmosphere instead of 93 million miles away. And that could explain why all the light beams are at angles to each other coming through those clouds. Okay? So
it's a strange thing. They have some good, competent arguments. They sound good, and I'm the atmosphere is a lens. Okay, basically you can look at it that way. I think in a simplistic fashion.
It scatters all the little molecules
that's right.
of nitrogen and oxygen and CO2 that's up in the atmosphere. Each one is a point of scattering the light. So the light almost acts as if its source was right at the edge of the atmosphere. And that's why we have these angular light beams coming through the clouds. Because if there was no atmosphere, they would all be parallel because the light's coming from the sun. But it's so far away it would be like parallel. Anyway, that's kind of an interesting subject in itself. But most of their arguments, if you really look into it, you can find the explanation that. And I always counter their arguments. Well, if the Earth is flat, why is the moon round, and why is the sun round, and why are all of the other planets round? Why is the Earth singled out to be flat? It doesn't make sense. I always have a counter argument.
No. Yes, of course. If you do meet one, ladies and gentlemen, be prepared. They're gonna push you up against the wall. They will.
Well, I can hold my own. Usually, that was one that threw me off, that one question. It took me about a month of looking into it to finally figure out why.
Good job.
But anyway, getting back to this reciprocal system of theory, I just tried to explain what scalar motion could look like so you could think about it in your mind's eye. But that's just a two-dimensional version. We're living in a three-dimensional space. Actually, I should say three coordinates of space, because we got up, sideways, and forward and back. So we got three different directions we can go. Each one of those directions is at right angles to each other direction. So there's no geometric progression from one coordinate onto another. And then in space-time, we have another coordinate of time, which is also at right angles to all the three coordinates of the volume of space. So what we do is we get a hypervolume with space-time, and what the AIAS site theoretically proves is that all phenomena is based on the geometry of this four-dimensional space-time. They don't have to go into higher dimensions like earlier in this century there was this Kaluza-Klein equation was developed that could unify magnetism with gravity, but it had to be in 5 dimensions. And they invented a dimension that curled around one of the other dimensions. You know, it was a kind of a ad hoc kind of a thing, but it could actually unify electricity with gravity. It was called the Kaluza-Klein theory. But this Alpha Institute of Advanced Studies has proven that it can all be explained with just 4 dimensions. They don't have to go any higher than the 4-dimensional space-time.
I'm glad to hear that. That's nice. I'm glad to hear that. I'm not saying I don't care if there's 20 or 30, but if they can do it all in 4, that makes it more mentally.
Well, they get this string theory going now where they're using like 11 dimensions to explain string theory, and they're just wasting their time. They don't have to do that. There's no proof that any of those other dimensions even exist. I mean, we can't. Can you come up with an experiment that proves that it exists? You know, if you can, fine. You know, I'd like to hear about it. But they can prove that there's 3 coordinates in our 3-dimensional space, and they can prove that time is there too. You know, so. But getting back to this reciprocal theory, the reason I wanted to bring it up is because Dewey Larson said, well, there's 2 kinds of space. There's 3-dimensional space with 1 dimension of time, like that we're familiar with living in. He calls that the material sector. And then there's another one where you have 3 dimensions of time and only 1 dimension of space. And he calls that the cosmic sector. And well, that puts an interesting twist on it. Well, maybe there's more than 1 dimension to time. You know, that adds another thought to the whole thing. But that was what's unique about the reciprocal theory is they have the cosmic sector and the material sector. And he goes on to develop the theory that in the cosmic sector, that's where the science of consciousness is developed. See, these other theories, like the one at AIAS, they can explain physical phenomena, but they can't explain consciousness. And you see, the leading edge of physics now is to find the connection between science and consciousness, how to formalize it and create working equations that would explain how that connection works. And so that's where the real leading edge physicists, the subject matter they're working on now is how to unify consciousness with science. And it's be quite a breakthrough if they're ever able to do that. Well, Dewey Larson claims that he did it with his reciprocal theory. And anyway, I listed the website on those lists of interesting places to go because I felt that there'd be people out there that would want to look into it. And his mathematics is not that difficult to follow.
Right.
It's probably easier than any of the other 2 sites I mentioned.
Very good. All right. Look under Herbert's name in guests. All right. And you'll see Dorsey Images. And then you'll see important physics and technical sites that defy standard physics. And you click on that, you'll bring up some links. And that's what Herb keeps referring to. Okay. We are about at our break now. We'll come back and spend another hour with Herbert Dorsey in just a few minutes.
Okay.
So hang on. All right, Herbert, go get a drink of juice or whatever you drink, and see you back here in about 5 minutes.
Okay.
Okay. All right. We'll be right back. Hang on. Okay. We are back. And Herbert Dorsey is back. Herb, one of the truly great teachers. When you just listen to him, you don't even have to engage much. Just listen and let it pour in. It all points in the same direction of knowledge, and wisdom acquisition. All right, barn builder, it's your turn. Go right ahead.
Okay.
How big is your barn, by the way? You got hay in it and all that? How big's your barn?
Oh, it's actually, we made it was an emergency situation. We had to evacuate one of our farms that had 9 horses and 9 head of cattle on it.
Because of the lava, yeah.
And because the lava was coming at it. And we had to move over to another farm that only had a 1-room cabin on it and 10 acres, which wouldn't support all of our livestock. So we built a barn out of a container. We had a container put in, and then we built a roof over the top of the container to catch rainwater, because we have to catch the rainwater off the roof and store it in a tank so we can water our livestock. They drink maybe 100 gallons a day, or more.
Yeah, sure.
So we need a lot of water for them and grass. And so we built a barn out of a half-size container, and we put a pretty good-sized roof on it. And
well, that's smart. The containers are good for a lot of things.
We had a 2,500-gallon chemtainer catchment tank. It's the best kind around, and so that keeps the water flowing to the cattle.
Good job. You get a lot of rain. You get a lot of rain there. Then, how many inches a year?
Oh, we had Hurricane Lane, and we got 40 inches in one day with Hurricane Lane that came through.
Oh, I remember that was a real deluge. Yeah.
And it caused rivers to flow through our farm and wiped out some of our fence line. And it was pretty bad.
Wow.
We got lava flow on one farm, and then we had Lane hit us on the other with severe flooding. And we had damage from the flooding.
I'm sorry, we got a tiny bit of a delay here. Did you see the picture story of how they stopped Hurricane Lane dead in its tracks south of the island of Oahu and just squashed it with EMF, dissipated it?
Yeah, I heard about it. I don't know.
I've got the whole. I put the whole picture story together.
Okay.
I'll send you the link. I'll send you the link.
Did Michael Sella have any input on that one?
No, I did it all on that one.
He's a
but
local
I'll send
guy.
it to you.
Me and him have talked a lot, in coffee shops.
No, he's a nice man.
He even checked one of my manuscripts and found some errors in it. So we're kind of like pretty well acquainted with each other.
He's a real talent, that man. Yeah.
Okay, now what I wanted to discuss was some more of this theory developed by the Alpha Institute of Advanced Studies. For one thing, they were able to derive the mass of a photon. Now, standard physics says the photons are massless, and objects with mass cannot flow at the speed of light. That's according to the theory of relativity. But the AIS has, through experimentation and advanced mathematical analysis, has determined that the photons do indeed have a very small mass. And because of that mass, using that mass value, they can predict exactly how much a planet bends a light wave as it goes past the planet or the sun. And they can say that the redshift is not due to an expanding universe. It's due to the fact that these light photons, if they are traveling across the vast expanses of space, are slowed down slightly by the gravitational field of all the matter in that space. So they have a counter explanation for the redshift that doesn't need an expanding universe, because they've been able to determine that the photon does have a mass. It's not totally massless. So I thought that was an important point I wanted to bring up.
Very good. No, good point. Yeah.
They have actually developed some of their theory into technology. There's a lot of people now, just like the Reciprocal theory site, there's a whole cadre of scientists at the Alpha Institute of Advanced Studies, and they're continually submitting papers and showing, refining the theories of the ECE theory that Evans originally created. He's now dead, but he passed away last year. Not even last year, recently, maybe about 2 weeks ago. And is all this whole cadre of scientists are helping to keep the whole website current, and they're listing all their latest discoveries. And
that's a very nice tribute when you hear that kind of thing.
And these scientists are all like leading edge, highly advanced mathematicians, people like that. And there's been a lot of them contribute to the theory and further it and refine it. But there's also been a couple of companies that have taken the theory and developed electronic devices that can generate extra energy. And one of them is located in Mexico, but unfortunately they only sell their stuff in Mexico. They won't sell it in the U.S., probably because they don't want to get harassed too much.
Probably so.
But anyway, I want to point out that they're not just a theoretical site. They're actually developing practical stuff from their mathematical theories. And
well, that's good to hear. The sky's the limit, It's wide open.
And even if you don't understand differential geometry, it's still very worth your while to go and visit the website because they explain a lot of stuff in regular English too.
Give the URL of the website again. What is it? The address?
AIAS.
Same one. AIAS. Okay. Got it.
It's just their initials of their institute with a .us after it.
You have a talking dog too, huh? Very good.
Oh yeah, that's my dog. She's down here to keep me company.
There you go.
Guarding the house. So the other thing, I wanted to get into Eric Dollard a little bit.
Yeah, there's a link to his site also in that group of links.
Yeah, and plus this new group I sent you, I believe I got his regular website there. Last time I sent you a link to one of his that extraluminal transmission website, which shows that they developed this transmitter that can transmit instantaneously across the Pacific from Bolinas, California to Hawaii. It's not limited by the speed of light. It was instantaneous. And it was developed by Alexander and Tesla working together.
Oh. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. So what I wanted to talk about now was, they have all these different types of technology out there that have been suppressed a hell of a long time. There's this fellow named Edwin Gray. Edwin Gray was given a certificate of merit by Ronald Reagan when he was governor of California way back in the 80s or 70s, And what Edwin Gray did, he invented a car that worked on what he called a pulse capacitive discharge electric motor. And he took an ordinary car battery, 12-volt car battery, and he ran the voltage through an ordinary ignition coil, which steps the voltage up to about 20,000 volts. And then he stored all this high voltage in a big capacitor bank. And then as the motor rotated around, it would connect the capacitor bank to a set of coils, and there would be a big jolt of electricity would suddenly make a contact. They'd have a rotating commutator make a contact. Actually, they didn't even touch each other. A spark would jump across because 20,000 volts. You get it real close together, it'll make a spark. Jump across and put a big high voltage on these coils, and there'd be a tremendous repulsion force. And so anyway, this motor was pretty efficient, and he put it in a car, and this car had a range of, I believe it was 550 miles on a charge in just two 12-volt car batteries. It was a 100 horsepower motor, could drive down the road 550 miles on the charge of just two ordinary 12-volt car batteries. You didn't have to have one of Elon Musk's big lithium-ion battery.
Elon Musk's. I don't know how that is. I don't know how he's still in business with that car. He's losing so much money. I'm surprised that he hasn't sold it off to Ford or GM or somebody else. It just seems like a turkey.
Yeah.
He's making cars, and there are apparently, from what I've seen, countless thousands of them just stored out in the desert in Southern California at one location. There are 2 locations. No,
he's not priced into the working man can't afford his cars. They're priced too high.
That's right.
Only the very wealthy people can buy them, and that's usually the clientele, are people who are very wealthy.
There may be 20,000 cars or more just sitting.
Yeah. Well, electric cars are the wave of the future. There's no doubt about it.
What am I going to do with my 56 Chevy, Herb? Come on. There better be gasoline around.
You might have to distill your own, brother.
Uh-huh.
I know a guy here on this island that tells me he's going to make an alcohol still and convert his car to run on alcohol. So if the ships quit bringing oil to the Big Island, that's what he's going to do.
Well, we've got an out, and I know you, so we'll get something figured out. Okay.
Oh, sure. My girlfriend, she says, Herb, I want you to build a solar garage. Let's make it like a garage with a whole bunch of solar panels on the roof. And then she wants to get an electric car, and we'll just charge the batteries up from our solar roof. Because we're all solar powered anyway. We're not on the grid.
I would imagine. Good for you.
Then we
I'm sorry. I don't want to get off. Don't lose your train of thought. But you had, for those of you who don't know, Herb was where all that lava was flowing in one area on the Big Island in Hawaii, and
the Puna area.
Yeah, it was bad, and I assume it's, from what you said last time, it's stopped flowing and everything's stabilized.
Oh yeah, we're in the rebuild stage right now. Everybody's recovering and rebuilding. Digging in.
Is that you've got 10 acres and stuff? Can you? What does a 10-acre plot cost there?
Oh God.
In round numbers, unimproved.
Okay, she brought this house, 10 acres with a one-room cabin on it. It's a fairly large one room.
Yeah.
And what attracted us, it was fenced all the way around, and it had a cement driveway going across a little creek and up a pretty steep hill. We saw the driveway. Oh yeah, it was one we want, because people get stuck so easy out in the mud around there. So anyway, we brought it for like $450,000, I think, somewhere in that ballpark.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I would have guessed. Yeah, very good.
But that was a high-priced neighborhood. She, her other farm, which she had 17 acres, it was, I believe she had about, in actual land, about $230,000.
Mm-hmm.
And she spent a bunch more, though, on improvements.
Easy to do. Yeah.
We built a house out there. I built it for her. She paid for the material, but I built it. I built her a number of barns on it.
Oh.
And a tack room and place to keep all her writing stuff. And we had 3 big water tanks out there. We lost it all. It just all went under the lava. The lava came through there about 30 feet high. Just whoosh.
Unreal.
And it came fast. And
Unreal.
We got our stuff out one day before it hit. We just had a lot of help from other ranchers that were really extremely helpful, or we wouldn't have got our livestock out of
30 feet thick, the lava
That's right.
flow.
A 30-foot wall of lava has buried everything. Unbelievable.
Wow, that is unbelievable. What happens to people who, I guess they own the land now that's on top of the lava, like a lot of good is going to do them? Their property rights would persist.
We're kicking around an idea of maybe opening up for blue lava rock mining, and they actually mine lava rock, believe it or not. They crush it up and make sand out of it and make gravel out of it and sell it to contractors and road builders, stuff like that.
Well, maybe there's an out to recover something anyway. I hope so. All right, well, thank you. I didn't mean to get
We don't know right now, but there's a possibility.
Right. Good. Okay. Back to basics.
Okay, well, we live in a sea of energy. There's energy everywhere around us. Not only do we have the solar and wind, we have the heat energy air, like Dennis Lee proved, and we got neutrino energy. Neutrinos are the flux of neutrinos coming in constantly is like in the billions per square centimeter per second. Right. I mean, it's a tremendous flux of neutrinos. The reason it doesn't kill us, because the neutrinos can go right through matter. They can go all the way through the planet without even barely slowing down. So they're really something. There's even people, some of the scientists, these Russian scientists have been developing torsion theory, torsion field, torsion wave theory. And they're thinking that neutrinos are really torsion waves. And they carry information, but they don't carry energy. So maybe the neutrinos can't be tapped for energy, although there's one scientist that claims he is capturing neutrinos and getting energy from it. That's
really? Now that's fascinating.
Yeah. Trying to remember his name.
How would you'd have to capture them magnetically somehow, electromagnetically?
Yeah, he was using the pancake coils that Tesla developed.
Uh-huh.
They're like they're a real flat coil that's wrapped around from a real small diameter to a big diameter, spirals inward or outward. And he claims that these coils unwind the energy of the neutrino. And I believe his name is Constantine Mile. And let's see. He's got a book out called Scalar Waves. And his name is spelled KONSTANTINMEYL. And he's located, I believe, in Europe. I'm trying to remember which country he's located in. But anyway, if you put that name into a search engine, you'll come up with his website and stuff like that. And his book, Scalar Physics. In my book, I have a book called The Covert Colonization of Our Solar System. And in that book, I have a chapter on scalar physics. And I developed all the stuff I was explaining on your show. I have it all in print and a lot more. And the chapter is in my book, The Covert Colonization of Our Solar System. And it's
that's a great title.
It's a chapter called Scalar Physics. Oh yeah, we get into quite a bit of stuff in that book, like portals. We get these jump rooms. You got people like Andrew Basagio saying, "Yeah, I was at the Mars jump room," and Stillings, and a bunch of those fellows. They all say, "Yeah, we were involved in it too," and.
Corey Good is another one.
He started out with Project Pegasus as a young child, and they sent him, not only teleported him from New Jersey, a lab they had in New Jersey, out to Santa Fe, New Mexico, at the Capitol in Santa Fe.
Is this Passaggio?
They were training these young kids. They found out that adults can't handle teleportation and time travel, but kids can because their minds are more flexible. Adults tend to go a little bit nuts.
Yeah.
And so they were training these young kids to be what they called chronauts, or time travelers. And he was sent back to Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, Andrew Basagio was. And he even provides a photograph of him there. They were just inventing photography in those days. And he claims, "Yeah, here I am right in this photograph of Lincoln's Gettysburg Address." So, I don't know if it's really him or not, but he claims that it is. So it's interesting, and there's all kinds of people say, "Yeah, we got the teleportation technology. Use it all the time."
Well, I wouldn't be surprised, Herb. I would not be surprised.
You got this one fellow named Tony Rodriguez, and Tony Rodriguez spent 17 years, and he was in one of these 20 and back programs, but he was inducted into it when he was pretty young. And he spent like 17 years of it off planet. And one of his stories was, I was on Mars for a while, and my job was to act as bait for these insectoids that are on Mars. They look sort of like big grasshoppers. And they had the Mars Defense Force there, the regular soldiers, but they had some of these new guys they'd send up there, and they'd just send them out there for bait, and then the insectoids would come in, and then the Mars Defense Forces would rescue them and wipe out the insectoids. Basically, that was the theory of how it was supposed to work. But anyway,
insectoids suggestive of non-human intelligent and above, or pretty primitive stuff, or are we talking about advanced intelligence?
These are actually very intelligent. They look like grasshoppers, but they're intelligent.
Why don't we make peace with them? Why kill them?
Well, apparently there's war.
If they're intelligent, they ought to be able to figure that out.
There's like a turf battle. There's also reptilians, like the Draco reptilians, and they have big, huge underground cities in these huge cavern systems under the surface. Now, this is according to Randy Kramer. He was a Mars Defense Force warrior himself. He was a super soldier.
Well, we've seen those the tubes, and I don't know if that's part of their underground system, but they're more than provocative. Let's put it that way. The pictures.
Are we coming up on another advertisement?
No, it's a slight pause to honor the people that make this possible.
Okay. Well, I mean, I don't know if I want to get into the subject if we're going to have to wait. But
you can come back
Tony
again.
Rodriguez,
we got another half an hour. Don't worry.
Okay. Well, Tony Rodriguez was sent up to Ceres. Now, the way he was sent there, they said he was on Mars, and they put him on a train. And then there was like a tube shuttle, and he's going along, and all of a sudden there's this thump. And then they get out of the tube shuttle a couple minutes later, and he's no longer on Mars. He's on the asteroid Ceres, and he's underground in this asteroid. And apparently the Germans, they were some of the earlier explorers on Mars. They had their anti-gravity technology developed during World War II, and they developed a mining operation in the asteroid belt. One of them was on Ceres, which is a spherically shaped asteroid that's about 100 miles in diameter, and the Earth is, by comparison, about 8,000 miles in diameter.
Yeah, it's a fly-speck planet. What it was.
So so you can imagine the gravity there is almost non-existent. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that he was talking about is this base was made from. They would mine an area and it would create a big cavern, and then they would end up building a city inside the cavern after they mined that area.
Herb, let me pause. Let me get this out of the way. We'll come back and finish that up. Don't lose your thought. Hold on. Be right back with Herbert Dorsey in a minute. Let's get right back to it with Herbert Dorsey. All right, Herb, go ahead.
Okay, well, the reason I brought up Tony Rodriguez is because as he was working on this big mining operation they got on Ceres, he's talking about gravity plates because, they got such a minute gravity there, they have to pull the workers down to the ground or they'll just float away. And so on the ships that he was on, they had gravity plates. He talks about different aliens who were they were trading with aliens from other star systems and other planets. And so they had to have gravity plates that would be adjusted for what the aliens were used to. They weren't used to Earth gravity, so they could vary the amount of gravity on these gravity plates. And not only does Tony Rodriguez talk about them in a certain amount of length, but Randy Kramer spent the last 3 years of his 20 and back on one of the Solar Warden ships out in space. So he was out in space, and they also used gravity plates on the ships to hold everybody down. So I got to thinking, well, how do these gravity plates, how could they work? And I have to tell you that the first gravity plate was invented back in the 1920s by a guy named Thomas Townsend Brown.
Oh, T. Townsend Brown, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, he called it a gravitator. And the gravitators that T. Townsend Brown were using basically was a condenser. or a capacitor. It was a large, high dielectric strength material that was sandwiched between two metal plates, conducting plates, usually copper, and they were charged to an extremely high voltage, usually over 100,000 volts. And he found out that they would develop a force in the direction of the positive plate. And so he developed these things he called gravitators, and he has a patent on it. I believe it's a British patent. He also has some American patents on other things.
He has quite a few patents, yeah. But he was an unsung hero from science, in my view. Brilliant.
That's why I knew that when I was at the University of California, there were big holes in what they were teaching us, because they never mentioned either Tesla or Thomson.
Now, you went to UC
SB.
The same place I went. I lived on Del Playa for 9 years, right on the cliff. And I remember people in science back then. I had friends, and they never seemed energized or charged up. And what you're telling me now, most of what they were being taught was by the book, manicured, pruned, cut back. You cannot teach physics without mentioning Brown and Tesla, for goodness sakes. Come on.
Well, that's the way I feel about it, but they never even mentioned either one of those guys. So, I knew there was a lot of holes in what they were teaching me, but I didn't make a big fuss about it because I wanted to get my degree. Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, getting back to these gravitators, Thomas Brown did a lot of experimentation. He experimented for decades with his little invention. And one of the things he did, he put these gravitators in a boat, a model boat, and put it in a tub of water. Mm-hmm. And it would pull the boat forward in the direction of the positive plate. And he noticed that it also was pulling the water around the boat forward as well as the boat itself. So it was dragging the water along with the boat, and he noted that it cut way down on the friction. But you see, it's generating a gravitational field that extends outside of the actual plates of this capacitor. It actually extends outside. And so it also affects objects around it as well as from inside itself. So this is the basic, probably the original gravity plate was probably invented by Thomson Brown. As I was saying before, the divergence of the vector potential is equal, or not equal to, but it's proportional to the gravitational potential. And if you take the gradient of the gravitational potential, you get the gravitational field. So they're directly related. The magnetic vector potential that creates the curling magnetic field around it is also the divergence of it, which means it's spreading out from a point or it's converging on a point. Like I was speaking last time about a spherical antenna, it radiates electrogravity waves. It doesn't radiate electromagnetic waves. And it's what's called the longitudinal emission of instead of a transverse emission. And since there's no magnetic field present, it interchanges between the gravitational field and the electric field. Well, basically your capacitor, well, let's start with a coil. A coil of wire is basically, it converts electricity into magnetism and interchanges between the two. And a capacitor is the same relation between electricity and gravity. It can generate gravity, and it can also, changing gravity can change electricity. So your capacitor is basically an electrogravitic device, where the coil is an electromagnetic device. So anyway, if you fed a signal to just a plate, a flat copper plate, it would also generate, for the most part, longitudinal waves or electric gravity waves. So it doesn't have to be necessarily a sphere. Just a plate could also do it. So with those ideas in mind, it shouldn't be too difficult to engineer a gravity plate, and you turn the dial on to get whatever strength of gravity you want. You know what I mean?
Very interesting.
So the stuff that Tony Rodriguez and Randy Kramer were talking about in their description of their 20 in back service and the secret space program, it's not that technically impossible to create some of the devices they talked about. Okay?
I wouldn't rule anything out. I just don't know if it's been done or not, but I certainly agree with you.
Well, they claim it is being done.
Well, claims are claims, and yeah, okay. I know.
But I just got to explain to you how physically it can be done.
I believe it can be, but has it been?
I mean, I'm telling you, it was already done back in the 1920s with Thomas Townsend Brown.
See, the problem, Herb, we have with people telling stories and accounts of things that they say they've been through, they're fanciful, they're often fascinating, but we don't know for sure if they're being embellished, if they're half-truths, partial truths. I don't know. Some of the people purveying these stories leave a little bit to be desired, I think, honestly.
Well, you were talking about Corey Good in our last discussion, and I started checking. You know, when you told me he's under a cloud, I said, "Oh my God, I better find out what kind of cloud he's under." You know, I heard a little scuttlebutt, so I went on the internet and looked or snooped around a bit, and found out it was this guy Jay Widener. He's the one who was the production director.
He was a producer at Gaia.
On Gaia.com. He was the producer for the Cosmic Disclosure series where David Wilcox is interviewing Corey Good, right? And he started telling about his experiences with that. And he's left a little reasonable doubt in my mind that maybe Corey Good is.
I've known Jay for over 30 years. The man has never been anything less than 100% truthful to me.
Well, okay.
That I know about.
I'm glad to hear that. I will say this, though. I mean, I did a lot of checking around after you told me about Corey Good being under a cloud. I said, oh, my God, one of my books, I use him for a source of a lot of information in that book. You know, I thought, man, maybe I'm really not telling people the straight stuff here, and it kind of, got to me.
It's your intent that counts, Herb, and I think your intent is honorable, obviously. And I wouldn't really worry about if you have a... Well,
I got a lot of respect for David Wilcox. And David Wilcox said that he had vetted Corey Good for a number of years before he released him to the public. Okay?
We need to talk off air sometime. Let's we'll do that.
We won't get on that. But anyway, so I'm admitting that maybe this whole thing, maybe I was hoodwinked, and maybe some of the stuff I put in my book, the secret colonization or covert
I do believe, without question, what William Tompkins told us.
Yes.
Bill was telling us.
He was the guy that convinced me, it's got to be true, because, I did a lot of research, and all the stuff he talked about, I knew that these guys, the guys he mentioned, like Curtis LeMay and some of the other people he mentioned, I knew they were deeply involved in MJ-12 and other secret space program stuff, the extraterrestrial stuff. I know that's true. I know I haven't a shadow of doubt in my mind the government has been interacting with extraterrestrials for decades and decades.
When you get a chance, listen to the first hour tonight. I'm putting it up on a YouTube video. I'll send you the link when it should be done tomorrow. Okay. And you want to hear that. So.
Okay.
All right.
But anyway, it was David Wilcox and the testimony from William Tompkins that convinced me that, this stuff really is going on. That's when I went ahead and wrote the books that I did. Mm-hmm. But, now I'm saying, well, maybe one of my sources is compromised.
Well, the overall message is credible. And, again, let me talk to you off air. I'll offer you some things that may be of help. All right.
Yeah, or send me a email or something. You got my email, don't you?
Remember that, Herb. Yes, I do. Yes, I just sent you a couple of links on Hurricane Lane, in fact.
Okay.
Yeah, should be there.
So anyway, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on, and I'm totally convinced that gravitation or gravity plates are totally feasible. I see no reason why they can't be engineered and built. We can create our own gravitational field, and we can create our anti-gravitational field. Another thing that the Alpha Institute of Advanced Studies verified was, and I mentioned this last time, I did a lot of research into the German flying saucers, okay? And I'm totally convinced that they were real. They had real working devices. And
can I say one other thing, please? I'm sorry to interrupt. You've got to go look at my video. I'll send you the link. I found a second black and white film of a 1939 test of a Hannibal craft, shot at distance, and it's quite visible, daytime, and so that video now has 2 pieces of black and white film of German discs in it.
Okay.
And I'll send you the link.
I appreciate it, Jeff.
Yeah.
So the idea, I finally, after looking at a lot of stuff, I came to the conclusion that they're powered by counter-rotating magnetic fields. They have these counter-rotating discs, and they have magnets on the disc. And I said that in one of my books, I said that I think it was Secret Science and the Secret Space Program book. These counter-rotating fields are also creating what's called counter-rotating torsion fields. And these torsion fields are creating a bubble of space-time around for a certain area of influence around the craft or around the counter-rotating magnetic fields, that anything inside that bubble is isolated from the space-time outside of that bubble. And so gravity will not affect anything inside that, and the inertial effects are not felt inside that, because the Mach principle states that inertia is caused by all the mass of the universe, basically. So if you're shielded from all that mass in the universe, you don't have any inertia anymore. Okay? So anyway, so that's how these levity discs, the Brill levity discs that the Germans developed. That was the operating principle. And they called them the Otherworld Flying Machine. And more than that, there was extra-dimensional effects when they flew these craft, which I mentioned in my books. And they actually were planning on going to Aldebaran. They had developed a flying saucer. I got it mentioned in one of my books.
Well, it was supposed to go into a wormhole with it, right?
Yeah,
Aldebaran's a long way off.
It would be extra-dimensional traveling that wouldn't have to cover light years, because, it was quite a few light years away.
That's where Maria went.
Well, that's what some people think, because, every member of the Vril Society disappeared after the war was over.
That's right. And they weren't going to be captured and turned into lab rats. Yeah.
Yeah. They disappeared. They couldn't find them. And some people think they went to Antarctica, but they might have gone to Aldebaran. So I think
Aldebaran is one of the big untold stories of the last century and all our time period. I think you're right.
Yeah, there's a lot to learn about all this. And we're still trying to weed through all the different stuff and find out what's true and what may not be true.
Right.
I
think for our listeners, if you just take half of it and discount it, just move it away. Just work with half and say, okay, half of it's true, or even a third of it true. It changes everything. Everything. So, as we were told,
that's
the world we live in is a lie. It's all a lie. It's an illusion.
It is.
Yeah.
It's not all a lie, Jeff, but there's a lot.
Not all of it. I'm being sweeping in my generalizations.
You're being angry like the rest of the people feel.
Hey, we've been conned for a long. We've been conned for a long time. No, that's right, and it does bother me. That's why it took me 7 years to get my bachelor's degree. But I finished grad school on time.
Okay, well, you did better than I did then. Well, so it's an ongoing thing. We're always learning new stuff, and we're also learning that maybe we were wrong about some of the stuff we thought we knew about.
Yeah.
It's an ongoing process, Jeff. We never finish.
No, thank goodness. That's what makes it fun. Never-ending learning, huh?
Exactly.
There's people who say we figured it all out. It's all over. We know what's going on.
No.
What a life they must lead. No thanks.
No, there's a a lot of mysteries that still need to be solved. And one of the big ones now is, well, what is this stuff that makes us conscious? We got people who travel out of body, like James Monroe, he's a real famous one.
Yeah.
And they don't need their body. They can look back and see their body they left behind laying on the couch or whatever. And they go and travel to other places without any vehicles, and just for their own mind, they can travel to other places. And, well, what is this thing we call consciousness? It's not what a lot of modern biologists think it's all centered in the brain, our five senses feeding information in the brain. We can live without a brain. I mean, we can be conscious without a brain. We don't need the five senses. In fact, some of these people who do out-of-body travel say, when I get out there, I have a complete 360-degree vision. I can see in back of my head as well as in front of my head. It's like you can see everything that's around you. So it's not
if you ever go over to, if you travel to Oahu, let me know. You need to say hello to Dick Allgaier over there. He's the remote viewer.
I hardly ever get there. Now I'm going to tell you, Jeff. Whenever I go to Honolulu Airport, and I rarely leave the airport because I'm on my way to somewhere else. I don't like big cities, and I don't like all the traffic.
He's a very gifted remote viewer. Talk about out of body. Yeah. He's awesome. Anyway.
Well, I totally believe it. I actually had a psychic living I had a house in Sedona, Arizona for a while. And I actually had a psychic reader living there, and she could astral travel at will, and she'd tell me about some of her experiences. So, I've been exposed to a lot of that, over my lifetime.
It's the normal day-to-day lives that people are given to live are so restricted and myopic. It's sad. And
we're only restricted by our mind.
That's right. Well, when the mind is taught and conditioned to be restricted.
Yeah, but it's the more adventurous of us like to break out of all that.
We
limitations
do.
And move ahead.
Unfortunately, the masses don't. But that's the game. It's always been that way.
One of the books I published is my autobiography. It's called The Adventurer. It's at Amazon.com. It explains my early life and all the stuff I went through and all the adventures I had. And I had some pretty crazy ones, let me tell you. But I never felt restricted. I always had the feeling that I was a world citizen and I wasn't going to be limited by borders and passports and all that crap. Wherever I wanted to go, I was going to go. And usually I would do it in a sailboat back in those days because I knew how to build sailboats and sail them. And I sailed to Cuba without a passport, without any... I had $2 left in my pocket when I got there.
How funny.
They thought I was working for the CIA. So they had me...
I'll bet.
They kept me in G2 security for 10 days while they were checking out my story. They finally realized I was telling them the truth. They released me. But anyway,
that's funny.
I wasn't limited by all this stuff, that they try to tell you. Right. I said, hey, I want to go, and I'm going to do it.
Good for you. Well, that's it. And you have in your book, I hope, at least one chapter on
Island. Are what I call God's laws. I respect the fact that we're not supposed to harm other people. We're not supposed
golden
to
rule,
right? Or stealing.
Simple.
I obey those laws, but the man-made laws, if I don't agree with them, I try to ignore them and keep a low profile so they don't find out.
Yeah. No, you got to duck. You got to keep your head down. That's right. I hope you have at least one chapter in your book on Isla Vista.
I think I got some stuff in there about Isla Vista. I
see?
do have that. I have the scene in my the book, The Adventure, where I was asking the professor about longitudinal waves. He said they were mathematically impossible, and I said, I brought up Tesla, and I got that whole scene in the book.
That's funny. That's very funny. Yeah, I have a picture story I put together of Isla Vista. I should send it to you sometime. What years were you there again? Approximately?
Say that again?
The window. What years were you there?
Oh, I was at UCSB from 79 to 82. I graduated in 82.
All right. Yeah. All right. Well, maybe I'll send you these pictures sometime. You'll enjoy it. But I have sent you a couple of emails with that the video of the 2 pieces of film footage of the German discs. I think you'll like that.
Yeah, I saw the last one you sent.
Too. Yeah, well, this one's it's the same film, but I've added about 3 minutes worth, maybe 4 minutes, of the second piece of film that I found. And
do you know which Hanabu model it was?
No, it would have been one of the early ones. 1939, I think, is the year they project that the film was taken.
What do you estimate the diameter of it was?
Looks like 35, 40 feet, maybe.
Oh, it had to be a 2 or 3, model 2 or 3.
I'm guessing. It was probably a half a mile away, so it's hard to tell. Maybe 50 feet.
Was there any trucks or anything near it, or was it just
No, it came up. We're looking at the top of buildings, and it came up from behind the tops of buildings, moved over to the right, and it was a little bit wobbly, that little leaf motion, and then it came right back down again. It looked like a test flight, going up and down.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to see it.
Yeah, you got it. It's in your mailbox right now.
Okay.
And for all of you listening, if you want to see it, just go to the YouTube channel on the right side of the top of Rense.com, and it's the first video up there.
Okay.
Herbert, thank you. We'll talk again soon. You just let me know when you're ready, and we'll book it. Always a pleasure.
Well, I'll have to get some more material together, you know. It takes a little doing to get all the material together.
Well, you're a great professor, and that's how you become a great communicator. You plan. I'll be here.
Okay. Well, we'll see you next time then.
All righty. Thanks, Herbert.
Sure.
Thanks.
Have a good one.
You too. Okay, Herbert Dorsey. And that brings us up to the weekend, and I hope you have a good one. Thanks for being here. Enjoy the videos, and it's an amazing universe. Don't ever let the con game get in your way. Mainstream media, government, banking, con game. It's awesome out there. All right. Talk to you soon. Be well.